Okay, we're going to finish out navigation lights for rules of the road. And we're going to start on towing. So far, the lights that we've talked about have been the same international and inland. Towing is where we start to depart and there start to be changes between international and inland. So I'm going to break those up, point those out to make sure that you know the differences. And we're going to start with towing astern. So towing astern is when we're towing a barge or another vessel behind us. Somebody's doing that. The good news is for towing astern, it's still the same for both international and inland. So let's look at the lights for towing astern. Vessels towing astern will show two masthead lights in a vertical line, side lights and a stern light, and that yellow towing light that we learned about earlier back at the stern. So two masthead lights, side lights, a stern light, and a yellow towing light that's directly above their stern light. Good. So that's towing astern. And that's towing astern less than 200 meters. So when towing astern greater than 200 meters, and by that distance, we're talking about from the stern of the towing vessel to the very back of the stern of the vessel being towed. If that distance is greater than 200 meters, then we change it up just a little bit. So we're going to have three masthead lights in a vertical line for towing astern greater than 200 meters. The rest of it's the same. Side lights, white stern light, yellow towing light above the white stern light. So we have some little memory aids to help with this one. White, 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 tow out of sight, greater than 200 meters. White over white, tow in tight, towing 200 meters or less. So that's our memory aid. White, 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 tow out of sight. If we're towing astern greater than 200 meters during the day, we'll have a black diamond as the day shade. That way, if we're during the day, you're seeing a towing vessel, you see a black diamond in the rigging, hey, look back, there's probably a barge or something back there somewhere. Make sure you know where it's attached. Okay, so then we have something called pushing ahead, rigidly connected as a composite unit. So we did talk about these in the towing section for seamanship. Rigidly connected as a composite unit. These are those ITBs or ATBs, articulated tug barge or integrated tug barge, where they have the hydraulic pins that lock in. So because they have hydraulic pins that lock in, they pretty much make them into a single vessel. And so they'll ride the seaway, they'll maneuver, handle everything else like a regular power-driven vessel. So we're not going to light it any special means. We're just going to light it like a regular power-driven vessel for its size. So one or two masthead lights, side lights, and a stern light, depending on how long it is. Rigidly connected as a composite unit. Okay, now we're going to get into pushing ahead or towing alongside, and this is where the differences are between international and inland. We'll start with international. International is pretty simple. Pushing ahead or towing alongside on international waters, two masthead lights in a vertical line. Okay, that's kind of like before. Side lights and a stern light. And then that's it. So it's pretty straightforward. It's very, very close to the towing astern. The only thing we're missing is that yellow towing light that was directly above our stern light. We think about it from ahead or from the sides. Yeah, we care if it's pushing something in front of it. We want to make sure and dodge and miss whatever's in front of it. But coming up from behind, we really don't care. As long as we don't run into the stern light, we're not going to run into whatever's in front of that vessel. So from astern, we don't need to have any special lighting. When we were towing astern, though, we had that yellow towing light, remember? So if at night you're coming up and you see a yellow towing light over a white stern light, that's a key to remind you that, hey, it's towing astern. So somewhere back here by me is going to be a barge or something, maybe slow, low, not low or slow, but low, maybe not well lit. So I need to keep an eye out for something that's behind it. But if it's pushing ahead, I don't care. I just don't run into the back of the towing vessel that's pushing, and then I'll be fine. International, two masthead lights in a vertical line, side lights, and a stern light. That's it. Inland, just a minor difference. So here it's not even too bad. Two masthead lights in a vertical line, side lights, still the same, but here's the difference. Two towing lights in a vertical line rather than the stern light. So that's the difference between pushing ahead inland, pushing ahead international. We have a memory aid for this one. Yellow over yellow, pushy inland fellow. Yellow over yellow, pushy inland fellow, pushing ahead or towing alongside inland waters. All right, so it couldn't be that easy. So here we're going to introduce you to Western rivers. The Western rivers have a special, unique lighting scheme for pushing ahead or towing alongside. The Western rivers are defined as the Mississippi River and all the tributaries that run into it. So the Mississippi, the Missouri River, Tennessee River, Ohio River, Ozark, all those navigable rivers that flow into the Mississippi are all part of what's considered the Western River system. And they have this unique lighting system. Pushing ahead or towing alongside, they do not show masthead lights. Otherwise, it's the same. Side lights, yellow over yellow, pushy inland fellow towing lights, but no masthead lights. So the Western rivers are further defined as above the river above the Huey P. Long Bridge. The Huey P. Long Bridge is a bridge in New Orleans. And our little memory aid for that is if they go up under the bridge knocks off their masthead lights, and everything above the river on the above the Huey P. Long Bridge doesn't have masthead lights. That doesn't really happen. Of course, it's a super high bridge. I've driven over it before. Big container ships can drive underneath it, but that's just our memory aid. So when you see Western rivers above Huey P. Long Bridge, think, okay, no masthead lights when pushing ahead or towing alongside. Okay, now we're going to deal with large towing vessels, towing vessels that are 50 meters or greater. And we definitely could have these, especially on international waters. On the oceans, we have large salvage tugs that could be 50 meters or greater. So in addition to the normal lights for towing vessels, 50 meters or greater, we want to add another masthead light as a visual range so we can tell which angle we're looking at. So they're going to have their two masthead lights in a vertical line for towing astern. But then we're going to have another masthead light so we can tell if we're straight ahead or if we're off to the side, we'll have that visual range so we can get an idea of what aspect we're looking at. And it can either be in front or it can be behind. But if it's in front, it's got to be lower than the vertical two masthead lights in a vertical line. But if our other masthead light is aft, then it has to be higher. So we always know which aspect we're looking at. But it can be either way. Furthermore, if that large towing vessel is towing astern greater than 200 meters, it's got to have the three masthead lights in a vertical line. White, 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 tow out of sight, just like before. But now, of course, we have another that still have other masthead light so we can see what aspect we're looking and what angle we're looking at. Once again, a diamond during the day for towing greater than 200 meters. Now let's talk about the vessels we're towing. The vessels we're towing have to be lighted so we can see them, we don't run into them, but they're only going to have side lights and a stern light. That way we know they're not under power. Side lights and a stern light. If the vessel being towed is being towed greater than 200 meters behind the towing vessel, it's also going to have a black diamond so that we can match those black diamonds. We see, oh, the towing vessel has one, vessel being towed has one. Okay, they're the ones that are attached. Okay, here's another unique thing about inland waters. Pushing ahead or towing alongside, the vessel that is being pushed ahead will show that special flashing light that we learned about earlier. Remember, the special flashing light is a flashing yellow light visible from ahead and abaft the beam on both sides, flashing 50 to 70 times a minute. It is going to be shown up forward where best seen on the vessel that's being pushed ahead. Vessels being pushed ahead also show side lights. Okay, here we're just kind of getting an aerial view to show what it would look like if we're pushing more than one vessel in a group, like a group of barges on the river. No matter how many barges we're pushing ahead, they're only going to be lit as one vessel. There's only going to be one set of side lights, one port side light, one red side light, and one green side light. And they're going to be shown on the furthermost barges and up at the furthest corners. And then there's only going to be one special flashing light that is also up forward. Note on these barges, there's no stern lights. If you're getting pushed ahead, no stern light, just the side lights up forward, and then that special flashing light flashing 50 to 70 times a minute. If vessels are being towed alongside, they will have stern lights. So we can see the stern lights in this diagram here, because if they're hanging off the side, we're not going to run into the towing vessel. We see its lights, but if something's hanging off the side, we need to have it lit too, so we don't run into the back of it. But once again, if there happen to be more than one on either side, it's still just a single set of side lights and a single special flashing light. Okay. We have something called an inconspicuous partially submerged object. So this might be a fish pin that's being towed, might be a log raft that's being towed, might be something called a dray cone, which we'll look at a little bit later, a diagram of that. But some object that's not a vessel, if we're towing it, inconspicuous, partially submerged, we still need to see it so we can avoid it. So it's going to have white lights, all around white lights at both ends, the forward end and the after end. During the day, it's going to have a black diamond, so to help call attention to it. So inconspicuous, partially submerged object, all around white light forward, all around white light at the after end. If it's greater than 25 meters in breadth, it's going to have white lights at all four corners. If it's greater than 100 meters in length, there's going to be white lights at least every 100 meters. Here's a diagram of what the dray cone might look like. So a dray cone is a flexible bladder. I've never seen one. Been told that they're possibly used for oil spill slops. If they're cleaning up an oil spill, they pump it into this big bladder, and then it can be towed off somewhere where they can get rid of it safely. So a dray cone, because it's flexible, only has a white light at the after end, not at the forward end. Now we're getting into anchor lights. Anchor lights are all around white lights at or near the forward end, and another all around white light aft at a lower level. Remember masthead lights? We had the highest one back aft and the lower one down forward. Here it's just the opposite. And in this case, anchor lights are visible through full 360 degrees, where masthead light was only visible 225 degrees. But white light forward and a white light aft. And if the anchored vessel is 100 meters or greater, it should have all of its deck lights illuminated so that we know not to drive in between the two anchor lights. During the day, a black ball up forward were best seen. Okay, vessels less than 50 meters at anchor only have to show a single all-around white light where best seen. During the day, still supposed to show an anchor ball. In inland waters, here's another rule special for inland. We have things called special anchorage areas. They're designated by the Secretary of the Department, whichever the Coast Guard is in. Used to be a Secretary of Transportation, now it's the Secretary of Homeland Security. But Secretary designates special anchorage areas, and they're marked on charts. If vessels less than 20 meters are anchored in special anchorage areas, they're not required to show anchor lights or anchor shapes. If you're driving along and you see a charted special anchorage area at night, you probably want to avoid this because there may be some small vessels that are in there without lights. Vessels aground will show lights of 2 all around red balls or red lights, all around red over all around red. Remember before we had red over red, the captain's dead. Now we have red over red plus anchor lights. The not under command, we did not have masthead lights. And that's where we can tell the difference between aground and not under command. Aground has red over red plus anchor lights. During the day, day shapes of 3 black balls. Okay, we have a section on moored barges, and there's a full paragraph that talks about barges projecting into a channel, closing off the channel less than 80 meters, groups of 2 or more wide. So there's a list of them. The easy thing to remember is if there's something sticking out into the channel, we need to light it so that nobody runs into it. So barges that are projecting into the channel, reducing the navigable width of the channel, less than 80 meters, or groups 2 or more wide, have to have white lights on the outboard corners that are sticking into the channel. 2 white lights on the outboard corners. Anchored barges, or barges in a group or projecting from a group, are supposed to have white lights on all 4 corners. And this recently has been amended. So the original rule is still there, white lights on all 4 corners, but now there's an amendment which says, or they may be lit like vessels of their size. In other words, just the regular anchor lights for a vessel of its size. Less than 50 meters, just a single anchor light, or 50 meters or greater, an anchor light forward and an anchor light aft. Here's our distress signals. These are official distress signals. Pointed these out. We could have red star shells, like the pistol fired flares, continuous sounding of a foghorn, open flames on the vessel, a gun fired at regular intervals of 1 minute, an orange background with a black ball and a black square, Morse code for SOS, Mayday calls on the radio, of course, red parachute flares, any colored dye marker in the water, the code flags for November Charlie, and that's what they look like. So the code flag for the letter N, November, is a blue and white checkered flag. The code flag for the letter C is that red, white, and blue horizontally striped flag. Any square flag being flown over a round ball is considered a distress signal. Waving both arms up and down simultaneously. A radio alarm, EPIRB, or an orange smoke. Okay, that finishes up the main section of the rules of the road. Now we start to get back into the annexes. So after distress signals, that's on, finishes on page 107. We start getting into exemptions and the annexes, and a lot of technical details, which you do not need to get into, but there are a few things in the annexes that you will need to get to. And the first one is Annex 2, page 126, where we have additional signals for trawlers. So trawling, remember we had green over white, trawling at night. Trawlers fishing in close proximity have additional signals to let other vessels around them know what they're doing. And we call them signal lights. They can have signal lights of two white lights in a vertical line to show that they're shooting their nets. They're putting their nets out. A white light over a red light is a signal that they're hauling their nets back in. And two red lights in a vertical line, their nets are hung up on an obstruction. So two white, they're shooting their nets, white over red, hauling their nets, or red over red, nets hung up on an obstruction. This is for trawlers. It's also the lights for purse seiners that are fishing in close proximity. Got the red over white seining, red over white fishing at night. Seiners can also show an alternate flashing yellow lights, one yellow over the other yellow, alternate flashing about a second in a vertical line. Okay. Annex 5 is on page 137, and that's where you're going to find this. Annex 5, 137, law enforcement may show a flashing blue light. Remember, a flashing light is all around, flashes 120 times a minute. Here we go, Annex 5, flashing blue light. Page 137, we see it in the middle of the page. Then down below that, we have something called public safety activities. And unfortunately, my animation is out of sequence here. But it's the bottom of the page 137. Vessels engaged in government sanctions, public safety activities, and commercial vessels performing similar functions may show an alternate flashing red over yellow light. Down at the bottom of the page, it talks about what these activities might be. Include but are not limited to patrolling marine parades, regattas, special water celebrations, traffic control, salvage, firefighting, medical assistance, assisting disabled vessels, search and rescue. These are all examples of vessels that might be engaged in public safety activities. All right, so that's it for the lights. Go ahead and hang on to your books though. I'm going to flip through and show you a few more things in your book. So the very next page, 138, subpart 82.5, lights for moored vessels. Here's where we can find the lights for the barge that I was talking about. Barges made fast to one or more buoys. Here we got the rule that says a barge may be lighted as a vessel at anchor in accordance with Rule 30, which is the regular rule for anchored vessels. So just kind of point out that that's where that is. Page 146. We see the COREG's demarcation lines, reading backwards there. But here in 33 CFR 80, it actually lists every single line of demarcation on the coast of the United States. So you can see it starts on the Atlantic coast in Maine, runs all the way around to the Caribbean and the Gulf Coast. On the Pacific, it shows where all the lines of demarcation are in California, Washington, and Oregon, and even out in the Pacific. But here we see Alaska, 17th District, no lines of demarcation. In Alaska, we only observe international rules of the road. So we don't observe inland rules of the road anywhere in Alaska. There's no lines of demarcation. Everywhere we are in Alaska, even on the rivers, It's international rules of the road. So we don't have lines of demarcation. Next couple pages, just more descriptive about where all those lines are. Oh, and actually, that's where we get to Alaska. Page 157, 72 call regs shall apply on all of the sounds, bays, harbors, and inlets of Alaska. There we go. Okay, page 159. I always like to point this out. This comes out of the 46 USC code. Paragraph 2303, duties related to marine casualty assistance and information. This is the law, and this is why I pointed out. Master or individual in charge of a vessel involved in a marine casualty, an accident, shall render assistance necessary to each individual affected to save that infected individual from danger caused by the casualty so far as you can do so without serious danger to the master or individual's vessel. Also requires you to give your name and address and identification. So you're required to provide assistance. Let's go to the next page because there's something similar on page 160. Paragraph 2304 in the middle of the page, duty to provide assistance at sea. Master or individual in charge of a vessel shall render assistance to any individual found at sea in danger of being lost. There it is. Just wanted to point that out, that you're required to do that so long as it doesn't put you into danger. So I turn those corners of those pages down. I also go to the next page, 162. I turn the corner of this page down. Here's a copy right out of the US CFRs for the Bridge to Bridge Radio Telephone Act. So if you wanted to know where it was, what's in it, it's right here in your rules of the road book, and tells you what you have to do. Page 163, radio telephone required. Here's where it says who has to carry a radio. Every power-driven vessel 20 meters or over in length while navigating, so larger vessels greater than approximately 60 feet. Every vessel of 100 gross tons and upward carrying one or more passengers for hire, required to have a radio. Every towing vessel 26 feet or over, every dredge or floating plant. So there you go. There's the requirements. And that's kind of the last of the things that I point out in your rules of the road book that you should be aware of and start memorizing. So there we go. So the only thing we really have left are sound signals, and I'll have a different presentation for that.